The knife is a Spyderco Stretch 2 in ZDP 189 with G-10 handle scales. I'm a big fan of the Stretch, so when I saw that this had come out, I was really interested in getting it. I hesitated on it because of the price difference between this model and the FRN models. But when I read about the enlarged handle size and the improved ergonomics, that was enough for me to make a decision on it. Right out of the box, this knife felt different than the FRN Stretches. It's heavier and it's a little bit larger. Now, the size difference isn't that much, but you can feel that there's a difference there. It's built very well. The fit and finish is really nice. It feels like a very solid knife. The lock feels very good on it. The G10 feels perfect. It's just grippy enough, but not overly aggressive. You can make an argument that these liners are sharp on the inside, and that on the finger choil there's a little bit of sharpness to the point, although that's not something that I found in use. I didn't notice it in use. It wasn't until I sat down before doing this and looked for things with the knife that I even noticed that. And if you really wanted to, you could go over these with a ceramic rod and break the edges. The handle fits perfectly. It just kind of falls into place in your hand. The contouring is nice. As you get up, the finger choil is enlarged on the Stretch 2 as opposed to the original Stretch models. It's much more functional now. The knife has a very thin grind. It's a full flat grind. It's a good amount of belly there. It's an extremely functional blade, very good for utility use. The jimping is fine. Spyderco seems to get that right. It's got a full steel backing, indent on the lock back. The liners do have milling. The weight difference between this and the FRN model, you can feel it when you're holding a knife. It's not that much. This knife isn't that heavy to begin with. I've said before, I don't mind a little bit of weight to a knife, and I don't mind it with this. I think it's fine. So when I got this knife, I posted about it online on the groups, and there was some discussion about ergonomics, comparing this model to other Spyderco models. And I wanted to discuss that, but I wanted some insight on the subject. So I got the knife and I reprofiled it to 30 inclusive and brought it to a high sharpness, and I carried it for several weeks. I wanted more than that. I wanted more than that for this discussion, so I put the knife through some use, through some cutting. I started with cardboard. I worked with several different kinds of cardboard. I worked holding the knife in different positions in my hand. Didn't have any problems there. I moved on to plastic strapping. There was no issues with ergonomics. There was no issues with chipping on the blade. The knife was fine with it. I then moved on to rope. I worked with several different kinds of manila rope. I worked cutting it in hand. I worked with cutting it on a board. There was no issues at all. The knife performed beautifully, exactly how I thought that it should have. After that, after the cutting, I had done a pretty good job of blunting the edge, so I needed to bring the knife back up to a high sharpness. I started on a coarse DMT diamond plate. I used it wet. I was working with that, and there's nothing wrong with the plate. Sometimes I'll go to sharpen, and for whatever reason, I'm just not comfortable with the situation. It just doesn't feel right. And that's what I ran into with the plate this time. Next knife I go to sharpen on the diamond plate will probably be fine. For whatever reason, sometimes it just doesn't feel like it's working. So these coarse diamond rods from Spyderco that I've got, I talked about in the last video, they're worn fairly smooth in this middle section of the flats. This side with the line there, with the indent, is not. I don't use this side as much. I can, but I generally don't. So this still has more life left in it. So this is what I moved to. I worked with that. I brought the knife to an apex just fine. There was no problem there. After that, I moved to the 3000 grit redstone. I worked with that. I used oil with it. That was fine. Knife moved through that with no problem. After that, I moved to 10,000 grit stone. Also using it with oil. Last time, in the last video, was EDP 189. This was the stone that I finished with, the green agate stone. After shooting that video and being done with it, I noticed later on that night the edge finish that was left on the knife on ZDP 189, and I really liked what I found. I mean, it actually made ZDP 189 feel sticky like M4. So being that these were still available and low cost, I went ahead and ordered a few more. The one that I worked with on this knife for this sharpening was this one. Difference being white as opposed to green. They're both natural, but I had the option of getting the white, so I went ahead and took it just to try it. I worked with that, and in both cases, with both stones, both for the last video with the green and this time with the white on ZDP 189, I found difficulty working with the burr. I thought when I was using the green that it was me. I thought I was doing something wrong. I found the same issue again this time using the white. So maybe it's a problem that's inherent to the stone, or maybe it's not. Maybe it was something that I was doing. What I was thinking about was maybe mixing the use of this stone with the ultrafine stone from Spyderco, and maybe finding some kind of middle ground between the two. That's something I'll experiment more with later. After that stone, I moved to strops, and that was something else that I did different this time. Instead of doing half the strops on wood and half on leather, I decided just to do them all on wood. Not because I needed to, but just because I hadn't, so why not? I started 3 to 5 micron, then moved to 1 micron, then 1/4 micron, then 1/10 of a micron. The edge came up exactly how I wanted it to. It was at a high sharpness. It was very aggressive. It was exactly what I wanted, how I wanted it to turn out. So the knife it's really good. I'm really impressed with it, and I'm glad that I got it. Like I said, the fit and finish is great. It feels like a very solid, well-built knife, and I think that it's great improvements on the model.